Thank you.
So, I would say,
I don't, yeah, it's not.
It's behind the easel. No, it's not. That's the microphone. That's the microphone. It is. I bet you it's in there.
yeah. I realize that's what I'm getting. How are you guys doing? Happy New Year. Even the presenters?
Yes.
Or just the public?
Everybody.
Everybody? Okay, I see by the clock on the wall, we are ready to begin. So I would like to call this meeting to order for the Village of Webster Planning Board meeting, first meeting of the year. Today is Thursday, January 3rd, and first order of business would be to allow the planning board to review the minutes of the last meeting. So give us a few moments, we'll get that taken care of, and then we will begin following the published agenda for the evening. I'm good. Peter, all set?
I'm good, yeah.
Kathy, good? All right.
Okay, need a motion to approve?
Yep.
I'll make that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Need a second.
I second
Oh,
it.
sorry.
I second it.
Karen
There you
seconds.
go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, we have 4 items on the agenda this evening, so we'll just start in the order as published. First order of business before the board is Mr. Walt Baker from DSB Engineering will be presenting for FG Martin LLC. They wish to subdivide an existing lot into 2 lots. This is his second appearance on this issue, I believe, and Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but all the legal issues are taken care of. So at this point, it's merely tell us what's transpired since last month and
Good evening, I'm Walt Baker with DSB Engineers and Architects. With me tonight is Mr. Lou Fico, the owner, partner in FD Martins, who owns the property. The map that we submitted to the board is the map I posted on this board. Here is the property. It's actually a little odd shaped. It follows this green line. Goes down along here, back up again, Orchard Street being to the north. Martin and Commercial Street, it's 2.6 acres, plus or minus. And what he'd like to do is subdivide it into two lots. There's the existing building that fronts on Orchard Street, the 2.5-story building. He'd like to subdivide this off, and I laid it out so we comply with the parking requirements for the commercial zoning. So we'd have parking on the side and the rear. There were issues, obviously, with the setback, the height of the building. As you well know, it's supposed to be so many, one horizontal and one vertical, so however tall the building is, it needs to be that far away from the property line. These buildings were actually built in the late 20s. So there's a building here, and another building here, a curve-shaped building, and two more buildings down in the corner over here. Two curve-shaped buildings, which were curved basically for the old structure that used to be in this area, which is now gone. It's just a concrete pad. There used to be a railroad spur that came off to the building, so back in the 20s they decided to curve buildings. So with that, we actually had to go to the zoning board to get variances for the pre-existing non-conforming structures. Obviously this one's up against the property line, this one's against the property line, that one's just inches away from the property line, and as well as the 2.5-story building to the adjacent property on the side. Obviously we knew that we had to stay 43 feet, creating a new property line. We can't make a non-conforming property line, so we got 55 feet to the back, which actually worked out well as far as creating a drive aisle for access to the garage doors and complying with the parking requirements for that. So when we create this new line, it'll be in compliance with the current code. We did go to the zoning board last month and received the variances for all the buildings that were actually in violation of the new code. We received that from the ZBA. We were here prior to that to present this to the planning board. Obviously, at that time, we had issues with the ZBA, so we had to go for that variance. And also, there's one other little minor detail. The boundary line actually extends into this building, this curved building. It's a 1- and 2-story building. So at some point in time, since 1920, when they created the streets and actually took right-of-ways, the right-of-way extended into the building. So I worked with Don White, and went to the village board to abandon this, so we created a map. We located all that, created a map, and the village board at their last meeting approved abandoning that portion of the property, the right-of-way property, and giving that to Mr. Fico. And he's got the paperwork tonight, so he's going to record that in the county clerk's office. So I think we cleared up all the issues on the properties in order to create a 2-lot subdivision from 1 lot. So
And lot 1 will have a permanent easement
Yes.
through it into lot 2.
right. Mr. Fico wanted to make sure that even though these existing buildings in the remaining land, which would be this lot 2, has access to Orchard Street, so when we create this new lot, it'll have an irrevocable access easement on the drive aisle to get from Orchard Street to the lot number 2, and vice versa. So if somebody comes in off of Martin, they can get into that property on lot 1. It works both ways. So we're here tonight for a 2-lot subdivision, and I believe it took us a few meetings to get everything cleaned up, but I think everything's in order.
So has the property been resurveyed, all the lot lines?
Yes, sir.
and
Yep.
All the ramifications of the quick claim and everything are all?
Correct, yeah. Don gave Lou the paperwork to take to the county and file it. It's all signed by the mayor.
Okay. I know we discussed this at length in the last meeting to the extent that we could. I don't see any issues as far as or approving the site plan. But I do know that even though there's technically no public discussion required for this approval of site plan, I do have received a request for Mr. Elder to make a comment regarding the historical aspects of the
I
buildings?
did.
Just for the public record.
I did. So I wanted to, I had actually, Louis was instrumental in doing some of the initial questioning about this building. So I'm going to give him the first copy. So I went through and I looked at 150 Orchard Street, and I'm here on behalf of the Historic Preservation Commission because I'm the chair. So I will give you guys a copy as well. So the actual building, which is oftentimes referred to as the old auction house, actually has a really interesting past to it. It was built around 1925. It was originally built by A.N. Martin Lumber Company. I gave you some approximate dates here because the record is a little sketchy on when the buildings, when the different businesses were in here. We do know that around 1971, there was a wallpapering business called A New Look there. And then Taylor Rental occupied the, you guys don't mind sharing, Taylor Rental occupied it for quite a while as well. So I've included in here some ads that I found in the newspaper. And I also included a look at the building. There's actually a picture of it in the Webster Herald in 1981. And you'll notice it has almost not changed since then at all. So one of the interesting parts is that since the facade has really stayed pretty much the same, it's great that it's going to be updated. So, and I know that's one of the project specifications here is that the new people coming in are going to make changes to it. And I think it's long overdue. So, but it's a very, I also included, if you flip it on the backside, some information about Mr. Martin himself. He has an extraordinary history in this village in terms of his contribution as a businessman and putting together the lumber company. He actually put together 2 lumber companies, and he was likely involved in some housing developments as well. He had advertisements as far as newspapers in Massachusetts for wood coming from the village of Webster. So I just want to let you all know that it is in a lot of ways, it's a very historic site, and that building itself has some very historic applications. I also provided you with one other piece of information. The concrete pad that Walt you were talking about, that is the actual newspaper story about its burning. I included in that packet for you. I think it was 1966 when it actually burned, and that story is about 2/3 of the building was burned in that one incident that night. So just wanted to let you know, it's an interesting piece of property from a historic perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the request to the board is for site plan approval to subdivide the existing 2.636 acre parcel into 2 separate lots with a permanent cross access easement from lot 1 to lot 2. We'll entertain a motion from the board at this time. Seeker is taken care of, all the legal things are taken care of, so really,
The zoning board did the seeker.
I'm sorry?
Zoning board did the seeker,
Yeah.
so you don't have to.
Right, so if any member of the board would like to make a motion for site plan approval to subdivide,
I'll make that motion.
and
I'll second it.
Kevin will second. All in favor?
And
Aye. We have a unanimous decision. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay. Item number 2 on the agenda this evening, we have Mr. Greg Chambry of Prestige Services LLC, current owner of 164 East Main Street. He seeks approvals to convert 164 East Main Street to a 2-family dwelling. It is currently a converted residence with a business, which I believe is no longer in operation. It was the former Penny Saver Publishing. So, Greg, please state your name and...
Greg Chambry, Prestige Services LLC, of which I'm a sole member. Hopefully this will be a short presentation compared to some, but I thought that we could do this administratively, but Mr. Barham suggested that I needed to come before the committee tonight. It's, the property is zoned properly for this type of situation, and just maybe interestingly, I can't follow up on Peter too well, but historically, as you said, this was the Penny Saver. It was purchased by another couple, whatever, and they went at this thing pretty good. I mean, it's been gutted. They advertise it as 6 huge dumpster loads of stuff that came out of there. And it's in bad shape, I'll tell you that. So I think the folks before me got into this and it was a little much. And so I've got a track record of doing these things, and I think I've done pretty well with them. I've done projects larger than this, so you know, I think it can turn out pretty well. And right now, if you drive by it, it's really in pretty tough shape and needs some attention, which I think I can give it. So that's basically it. It's a good size house that I doubt anybody would use as a house, probably when it was built. Mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and everybody, you know, kind of lived in these large houses. But this would be a huge undertaking, I think, for a private party to go in there and keep it as a one family. The economics of it and the money you'd have to put into it just doesn't work, the numbers don't work. So that's really the rationale for acquiring the property and going with the 2-family there. And I think our reputation in the village kind of speaks for itself, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay,
Very good.
Roughly, how do you see dividing it into 2?
One up and a down.
Up and down both?
Yeah, it's pretty big, so it would be between 1,200 and 1,300 square feet for each one, which is quite sizable.
And it'll incorporate all those office spaces down in that lower level?
Some on the first floor, it would be a lower. If you're familiar with it, the office in the back was kind of its own entity where you kind of came in the back, but that, really my numbers that I just stated don't even include that. You know, the first floor is huge, and then the upstairs is just as big.
all right, so, good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I just had a couple of questions
Sure.
of clarification here, so I understand. You are the current owner.
I am not the current owner. This is contingent on this happening. There's an offer on the table. This is contingent on a 2-family. Part of the offer is contingent that a 2-family be approved.
Well, that's where I'm going here. So I see you have Joe Vincent is the person who wants to take
Sell
over
it.
this property from you.
No, he wants to sell it to me.
Oh, he's the owner, and you want to convert it.
Exactly.
Oh, well that, because that's, I thought you would, I was looking at this.
Right.
Okay. All right, that clears it up. So, based upon the information of what the property is and how it's in the current residential district, there are a number of code sections that the property would have to comply to in order to be converted to a 2-family residence. So, obviously then, if you are buying the property from Mr. Vincent, contingent upon the planning board saying, yes, the 2-family can go. The property is certainly within the bounds of the village codes, a permitted dwelling. But in order to be that, there are also a number of, shall we say, features and paragraphs within the code that would have to be complied to. And in order for us to actually proceed forward, we would need from you a site plan, how you address the parking, how you address the trash management, all that other stuff. That's all part of the village code. So, obviously, we are not here to say no, we're here to say yes with conditions, and one of the conditions would obviously be, you know, a fully prepared site plan addressing all the village code issues. So, obviously, you're not in a position, it wasn't presented to us at this time, that documentation or paperwork. So I don't think we're in a position right now where we could say that, even make a motion to say that, yes, go ahead. But knowing that this is a permitted usage of a property to be converted into 2-family, and knowing your reputation in the village, what you've done, what you do. Chances are obviously very good, unless there is violent opposition from the village.
Okay.
So, I don't, obviously not here to
So I was
discourage you,
surprised
but,
that this is far from an administrative,
right, there's, you know,
okay.
present what's required for the code sections applicable to the property being a two-family, and then we can proceed considering.
Okay.
Now, at this point though, because you've already made the presentation, and if there anybody else on the board have any comments?
No objections at all.
Karen? All right, then I would like to at least open it up to the public, and if there is any public commentary, yay or nay, and I do have some comment from the public that came in on an email, the person who was
So
not
could I ask one
able to be
question?
here. Sure.
There's not an opportunity to give approval contingent on the building inspector, reviewing all the codes and conditions that would have to go along with this? Or would it have to come back to here for?
It would have to come
review
back here
of
because one of the code sections says planning board has to review the site plan.
Okay.
So we need to see, see the property in its proposed redevelopment as a two-family. So you'd have to adjust the parking issue, the landscaping issue, the trash management, those types of
All right.
things. So,
Understood.
okay? All right, but I would like to open it up for public comment if there is any public comment, yay or nay, towards this property.
My name's Paul Scheible. I live at 135 East Main Street, and I actually own the property directly to the west of the Penny Saver, 150 East Main Street. That's a two-family rental up and down. And I just want to say I would like to see this happen.
I'm sorry, you would,
I would like to see this happen. Penny Saver's been sitting abandoned in rough shape for a long time, and I don't think even when they were there the last few years, there wasn't a lot of maintenance done. I mean, it was kept up, but it needs a lot of work. And I went through the place, it needs a ton of work. So I know, I was hoping to acquire it maybe, but it's so much work that it's gonna take somebody like this to get it done. And so I think we need to grab onto that opportunity.
Thank you.
yes, there is no doubt that these old structures are a handful.
Yes.
Yes, I've been there. So, anyone else? Okay. I would just like to, for the record, state that we did in fact receive an email from a property owner, Mr. Hans Husch, from 142 East Main Street. I will read this as it is written. Hello, I am Hans Husch. I own and live in the property at 142 East Main Street. My work schedule does not allow me to be at tonight's meeting. I am firmly against the proposed conversion from one to two family at 164 East Main Street. There are already plenty of duplexes and apartment complexes in the immediate area. Our neighborhood does not need any more multifamily units. This proposal would open a door that needn't be opened. We strive to keep our residences tidy and kept up. Such a move would invite more of the same until the entire street would be a rundown mess. If the owners want to make more money, they can do it elsewhere. I vote no. Thank you, H.C. Husch. Okay, so there is no more comment from the board. I believe Greg will do his due diligence as far as site plan preparation and come back to us when you are ready.
We'll see.
Okay. Moving on. Item number 3. Mark Van Epps, developer for Brittany Woods subdivision, applicant seeks a change in the approved lighting plan for the Brittany Woods subdivision pursuant to Village Code Section 137-11C. Mr. Van Epps.
So, as we were starting to build the project, I was looking over the plans a little more closely. and I realized that the lighting plan was horrible. So I sent it back to the engineers for revision, and I got a revision back, and I reviewed it, and I approved it this time, and brought it to Jake and Will, and we went over it and hashed it out, and that's it. Jake gave us approval on it, and we just want to switch it. It's just moving some light posts around.
Okay. Any comment from the board?
No?
Okay, all right. There's my report. Okay. All right, so, based upon the approved lighting plan for the subdivision, initially we had 20 streetlights strategically drawn by T.Y. Lin.
Yeah, except that they were not so strategic.
I'm sorry?
They were not so strategic. That was the
Well,
problem.
they obviously thought so at the time.
Yeah.
So this is the amended site plan now, which
Right.
reduces the 20 lights down to 14,
Yeah,
and it's already been shown.
to Jake, and we went over, had a meeting about it, and went through it all.
Okay, so let me just check one thing here. 137. Okay, 13711 addresses variances, and there was a notation in here, large-scale developments, the standard requirements usually may be notified by the planning board. In the case of planning board, for no complete neighborhood and each other. Okay, so basically you're just requesting a change in the site plan for the lighting portion. No commentary from the board.
No, if it was needed, if it got changed, looks good, done.
Well, the new lighting plan layout, obviously, from my perspective, makes more sense. The poles are now out of harm's way, so to speak.
Exactly.
I built subdivisions and people hit the poles all the time. You wouldn't
Right.
believe they would, but they still manage to, so.
Right, and they're still
Fully-
gonna hit these,
Yeah.
but hopefully not as much.
They'll manage, and
Right.
obviously there's 6 less poles to hit, so, besides cars, plows, everybody,
Right.
I get it, so, I don't see any issue with it. So at this point, okay, so basically, all we need from the board, there was no public commentary section, this is already an approved site plan, this is just an amendment to the site plan lighting. So basically, all we need is a motion from the board to approve or amend the existing site lighting plan to the revised site lighting plan. And this is gonna be subject to submission of the new formal plan stamped from the engineer.
We already submitted it.
Oh, I haven't seen it. You got it?
Yeah, it's the
All
same,
right,
just with a stamp.
all right.
Yeah.
So I got it. Okay, all right, so if any member of the board will make a motion to accept the revised site lighting plan,
I make a motion to approve it.
do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
And
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Very good.
Thank you.
Mark. Okay. And last but not least, we have in front of us, item number 4. Nixon Peabody, representing Bell Atlantic Mobile Systems of Allentown Incorporated, doing business as Verizon Wireless. Applicant seeks to install a 37.7-foot tall wireless telecommunications facility located at 70 Barrett Drive, which is the Knights of Columbus building. Applicant is seeking relief from zoning regarding location of the antenna from the property line boundaries. So, you are, sir?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Jared Lusk from Nixon Peabody. I'm the one that submitted the application. With me is Mark Kulik from Tilson. Tilson is a consultant for Verizon Wireless, and David Ertz from the Knights of Columbus, Webster Columbus Center Incorporated owns the property. So I trust you've all had the opportunity to review our package. I won't review it line by line,
Thank you.
but the need for the project is outlined. Verizon Wireless is currently involved in a small cell cluster project in the town and village of Webster. That's been outlined in Exhibit F of your application. And basically, there's two towers, the South Webster site that's located at 1073 Webster Road, and in its current Webster site located at 1005 Picture Parkway, that are both at capacity, exceeding capacity, meaning there's only so many calls, texts, video downloads, and things that can be handled by any particular location. And in Exhibit F, there were some line graphs showing you how the traffic has increased year over year. And there's about between 2016 and 2017, there was like a 65% growth in the amount of traffic being handled by Verizon Wireless Network. And that is the need. We're constantly out, because, I mean, your refrigerator is calling or telling you, or ordering milk when you're out. All your cars are talking to it, your radios are all talking to these towers, and the traffic, the data traffic on the towers is growing exponentially year over year. And so Verizon, we should be these should have been done 2 years ago, but we can't keep up with the demand on the network. So one way it used to be back in the old days, when you had a capacity problem, you would end up building a new tower in between the two existing towers. Well, technology has advanced in such a way that instead of putting in a new, what you would say, 150-foot tower, we're proposing 5 small cells that are about the size of a 5-gallon pail that are installed in the highway right-of-way, sometimes on a utility pole, or in other places based on available property and the need in the area. So this particular project, which is one of 2 in the village, is located on the, and I want to say this correctly, on the Columbus property, what Webster Columbus Center property. We're proposed to place it on a utility pole. Utility pole is 34 feet tall, similar to any other utility pole that you would see on someone's property. And the antenna is proposed to be installed at the top of that pole, making the overall height about 37 feet 7 inches. And there is a small little radio equipment cabinet that's about 2 feet by 1 feet that's attached to the utility pole about 10 feet off the ground, that contains the radio equipment, and there'll be an electric meter there and other utilities, the fiber connection to that. But what you would see on a customary utility pole, and this, along with the other 4, will provide the necessary capacity relief to the area. Now, these antennas tend to work in a distance about 500 to 700 feet from the pole. So it will, instead of the traffic in that 500-foot radius approximately being handled by those 2 towers that are over capacity, it'll now be handled by this smaller antenna, thereby indirectly providing more capacity on the 2 towers. And so they're strategically placed in locations where people see there are a lot of users in the area, whether residents, businesses, etc. And so that's the purpose of why we're doing what we're doing. The tower technically was placed on the Columbus property in a location that makes practical sense. If you've been out there, there is a trailer, a driveway, and some other improvements there. Typically, your code, like most codes, require that there be a setback of 40 feet from property lines for these types of installations, except the code didn't contemplate a small cell on a small utility pole, and it's not uncommon, in fact it's quite routine, for utility poles to be located right on the property line for similar properties. Here, if we were to put it that required 40 feet from the property lines, it doesn't make sense because you'd and I haven't quite measured this, but you'd be right in the middle of the structure that's there, like in the living room, or you'd be in the middle of their back lawn of their building, which doesn't make sense to place a utility pole there. So again, it's a common use on the property line, and it makes sense where it is. So Verizon is proposing, because it's only about 10 feet from the property line, a variance from the requirement to be 40 feet from the property line, as well as the special use permit from the planning, from the zoning board of appeals. So both of those approvals, and those require a recommendation from the planning board up to the ZBA, and that's why we're here. So, does anybody have any questions as to why we're doing what we're doing in terms of the need for the project and/or the specifics of the site? It's a relatively simple project location, and all I can say is if you were out and looked at it, you'd understand that this is the most practical, best location for this pole on that property.
Any questions from the group? No? All right, well, I read through it, and I mean, obviously, you did your homework. And all the documentation makes for a very compelling case. I mean, the maps for the coverage areas are all in there. And what Mr. Lusk did not mention is, I mean, because of the proliferation of wireless technology in our current world, the need for these things, and it's kind of sort of dictated by the FCC, and because all the first responder agencies, police, fire, emergency, everybody uses cell phone technology. We need coverage. We can't, in good conscience, leave dead spots when there are proposals in front of municipalities to say, you know, this is a need. It's not something that can just be ignored or thrown away or not even considered. And if anyone has seen what this thing would look like, if you didn't know that this was there, you wouldn't know that it's there. It literally will get lost in the trees. It's in an ideal spot. It's literally hidden behind dumpsters. And they're in the property corner. There's mature trees all the way around it. So, I mean, from a placement perspective, I mean, there's not much to say against this.
It's the right location, just doesn't happen to meet the setback.
Right. So, as is customary though, I will open the discussion to the public if anyone has any commentary regarding the proposal to place a microcell tower on the Knights of Columbus property. Okay, I hear no violent disagreement from the public. All right, back to the board it comes. So, basically, we have applicant seeks relief from zoning. You are seeking a 30-foot variance, traditional 40-foot setback. You want, is requesting a 10-foot setback. So, a 30-foot variance. And basically what we need is, first and foremost, a motion from the board to consider this a type 2 action regarding seeker.
I would suggest that you leave that to the zoning board. Yours is only a recommendation to the board. You're not really granting an approval.
Okay,
So I'd let the zoning board handle
the seeker.
because they're the ones actually giving the approval.
Okay.
You're just making a recommendation. They could ignore you if they wanted to.
True, very true. Okay, then if I don't need a seeker motion,
But
then
it is a type 2 action, which doesn't, it's
what did I say?
technically, you said type 2.
Oh, got it right.
So it technically doesn't even require anything.
Okay,
But we'll leave that to the zoning board.
right. All right, so then the necessary motion would be a positive or negative recommendation to the zoning board for a property line setback relief for the placement of the antenna pole as listed or as described. Would
Did you
anyone
say
care
a
to make
negative
that motion?
recommendation?
I'm sorry?
Is it positive or negative?
Positive or negative recommendation? I gotta give that option. So, and I will make the motion for a positive recommendation to the zoning board for a 30-foot variance setback for the placement of the microcell antenna pole on the Knights of Columbus property.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We have a unanimous motion, recommendation to the zoning board for the placement of your microcell tower pole.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you. Happy New Year. Okay. All right, that is the last item of business before the board this evening. So, just as a reminder to the board, we start a new year, so we start new requirements for our training. So, obviously, as training aspects come up, please consider getting your 4-hour training. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that you guys take care of that as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. So, with that stated, it is now 7:40. I would take a motion to put this meeting to rest.
So moved.
So seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye? Okay. Thank you very much.